Is this the dagger? Oh, boom shakalaka! Game series. Toronto has won.
Hello and welcome to The Swing. As always, it's your boy HK, and we are live today on SportsTrends for a very special trade deadline edition episode of The Swing. Obviously, trade deadline is set to be at 3 p.m., so there's a lot of movement, a lot of potential franchise-changing elements that can happen, and we've already seen a number of them happen already throughout the day. So before we even get into anything further, first of all, I do want to give our shout out to our sponsor, Thrive Fantasy, which, if you guys aren't aware as of yet, is a daily fantasy props website where you can sign up using the promo code SWING, SWING, and get up to $50 of your deposit matched 100% to join contests on a daily basis. And it's very simple. You'll have 10 to 20 players where you have to go ahead and select the over or under based around whichever statistic measure is given for them. And that is how you can earn some very legitimate money. But with that in mind, we are going to move right into talking about the trade deadline. And I am being joined by my co-host, that guy Oasis, who is also just chomping at the bit to talk about just exactly what could happen here. So before we do any of that guy Oasis, let's go over some of the deals that have already happened so far in this trade deadline day. It started all the way back from 1:30 a.m. in this morning, where we found out that the Sacramento Kings had traded Corey Joseph as well as 2 second-round draft picks to the Detroit Pistons in exchange for DeLon Wright. So very much a like-for-like comparison being made there. Obviously a situation where DeLon Wright, who himself was having a career season with the Detroit Pistons, now gets to move on to a team where definitely there's more talent, there's more youth on that team, and there's more of a push towards the future. And they kind of needed that defensive stopper as well as the size. So what do you think of that trade?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of high praise for DeLon Wright just because he is, an ex-Raptor, and we've seen some of the things that he's done over the years. And, he will be alongside De'Aaron Fox, which I feel like, if you look at the team, it's already a pretty solid, quick team. And now, if anything, it's quicker and longer. And, yeah, it brings a great defensive presence. And I still feel like, DeLon is a great distributor when he's given the task to do so. So I think that's great for Sacramento.
Absolutely. And I mean, Sacramento is a team that, as we said in our previous podcast, still very much in flux, still trying to figure out exactly how they could really put together all these pieces, because both you and I have talked about it. This is a team that has got all the talent to be a legitimate playoff team, to actually make some real noise, but they've never really been able to put it together. So hopefully with this deal, they can start to get a little bit of a positive move towards it, while Corey Joseph goes ahead and adds a little bit more veteran presence to a Detroit Pistons team that's still waiting for their big rookie point guard to get out of injury. Killian Hayes has been out since very early in the start of the season. They haven't had an opportunity to really see what that tandem of him and Jeremy Grant, who's had an incredible season, what that could look like. But having that veteran presence could definitely have a big impact for them. The other move sorry, go ahead.
Will it? No, just kidding. Shout out to Corey Joseph, hometown boy.
By the way, we're going to find, as we keep going on into this podcast, into this entire trade deadline, just how much Raptor-centric this entire trade deadline is. The amount of pieces that are being moved left, right, and center of guys who are current and ex-Raptors is interesting, is a bit refreshing, and it's kind of funny to have us in the absolute center of attention with regards to that, and we're going to speak more about it. But that was late at night. The NBA and the teams were kind enough to go ahead and allow us the opportunity to at least sleep for a couple of hours at night.
I swear.
Before we saw the action pick right up in the afternoon. And right away at 10 a.m. in the morning, we heard that the Cleveland Cavaliers are sending JaVale McGee back to the Denver Nuggets, back to the place where he got his first big extension, Masai's first big contract as a GM for that team before he made his way over to the Toronto Raptors in exchange for Isaiah Hartenstein, 2 second-round draft picks. So, a bit of a kind of a slight shuffle move, but as we talk about the Denver Nuggets keeping on going, they're making a lot of moves today.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I can't. We were gonna get into the next one after, but just with this JaVale McGee trade, I was kind of curious. I was confused as to why they would need to get someone like JaVale McGee. But if anything, it just reminds me of the good old days where Shaqtin' a Fool and Denver Nuggets and JaVale McGee were synonymous. But he's matured as a player. He is a 2, maybe 3-time champion at this point. 3-time champion, and his game has definitely matured. And with that vet sort of presence, like I think he's an asset to any team, and he can get you like really quick points, decent defense, great guy to have some depth. And we talk about teams that made a run last year and just wanted to kind of upgrade and see where that ceiling is. Denver is that made some big moves. And anything that you wanted to kind of comment on with JaVale McGee in particular, or Denver as a whole?
I mean, like I said, Denver, this is just one of many moves that they're going ahead and making. And for JaVale McGee, he kind of steps right into almost like the Mason Plumlee role that the Denver Nuggets had last year, where it really was, big for them coming off the bench. As we saw, the Nuggets have had just, apart from the injuries that are ravaging the team altogether, we are seeing that there's just so much flux with regards to their bench unit. They haven't really found that replacement off the bat. They obviously lost Jeremy Grant over the offseason. They lost Torrey Craig. They lost Mason Plumlee. So these have been big pieces that the Denver Nuggets have obviously been missing. So it's just one of those scenarios that could be making a lot of moves for them. But before we go ahead and talk about trades that have happened, again, we are all about alert, and trades as they occur. So we have just found out that Toronto is trading Matt Thomas to the Utah Jazz for a 2nd-round pick. So Matt Thomas is gone for a pick coming back. What do you think about that? I know you're a big Matt Thomas guy, but was this something that was on the cards?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought, I had high hopes for a guy like Matt Thomas on the Toronto Raptors, especially like in a season where we're shooting the most threes we've ever shot in the history of the franchise. So, I mean, I thought he would be a fantastic fit. He worked out with JJ Redick, and, I had a lot of high hopes for him coming off the bench or just coming in to score like a Duncan Robinson here and there. You know what I mean? So didn't happen, didn't work out. His defensive line, like one of the problems with the Raptors this year has been the defensive issues. And part of the reason is if you put a guy like him on the court, it just seems that the amount of times he gets a chance to score versus the amount of times he lets, a player score on him or lapses in the defensive end, it wasn't working out in a positive way. So, he's gone. And for a 2nd-round pick, I mean, I think that's fine. We're not hurt by this at all.
I mean, in the end, it's clearly a salary-saving move, a situation in which the Raptors are trying to keep their books as clean as possible because there are moves to be made. And just as we spoke about, I said Salman is also confirming that. So Matt Thomas, yes, is in fact gone from the Toronto Raptors off to the Utah Jazz, where he is in fact being waived right there. So hopefully right away. So hopefully Matt Thomas can get an opportunity somewhere along the other lines, but in a salary-saving move, a pick-getting move for the Toronto Raptors, he is gone.
Got a feel for the guy. The guy came back from, he came from overseas, made it to the NBA, looked good, and then got, ousted. But that's the way it goes. Sorry, continue about what you were saying.
Absolutely. It can absolutely happen. So just sometimes these things don't work out. And in the end, for another team where you really hope that things could potentially work out, but they don't. And that is the Orlando Magic, where a team that has had just so many pieces, so much talent, been one of the best defensive teams in the league for the last couple of years, but have never really been able to have that situation where a combination of health, just overall cohesiveness, and just straight up getting their talent to do the best that they can do rather than just the names on the piece of paper. And as a result of that, Nikola Vucevic, who was the franchise cornerstone for so many years for the Orlando Magic, is on his way to the Chicago Bulls in what was actually one of the bigger early morning moves. He was gone.
Biggest trade so far.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's one of the biggest trades so far. And he went in a trade that brought Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., and 2 first-round picks, while the Bucks also received Al-Farouq Aminu in the deal. So definitely a big move there as far as the Chicago Bulls are concerned, because they are definitely looking to make that push now to be able to be a postseason team. Obviously, Zach LaVine has taken huge strides this season from an offensive perspective, and I'd even say just from an overall player perspective, vision-wise, just leadership, everything is better. So it just needed to be a scenario where they get that vet support that really helps push them into that playoff situation, and they very well could be a legitimate playoff team now.
Yeah, right now for sure, I think that this team was playoff bound to some capacity this year, whether it be in that little play-in or, finding the last few spots within the Eastern Conference. And, I've talked highly about Zach LaVine over the years, and you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head with every single thing you said about him. But Vucevic going to, I had not expected them to make a move for Vucevic. That is completely out of the blue. And now you think about the long-term effects of having a guy like Vucevic in the roster. That makes you a playoff team for a long time. And the great thing about being a Chicago fan right now is the fact that Zach LaVine's in his prime. Vucevic is in his prime. Mm-hmm. And those guys are really going to go, they're going to complement each other so much. And I'm just really excited to see what that looks like as a product on the floor. Whereas, giving up pieces like Otto Porter, it gives up a little bit of depth. But I mean, in the greater scheme of things, if you're going to get a guy who is a perennial all-star and, can score on demand, great in the post, get you rebounds, has decent vision, man, you're making that trade 100% of the time. I'm actually surprised of how little they had to give up in terms of their future for a guy like Vucevic.
Well, I mean, it's a combination of things. First and foremost, Vucevic had signed a very large contract into that situation. So for a guy who's 30, which is not necessarily old or any of that, but
not
for a guy
all.
Who's into that, but a 4-year, $100 million deal was definitely something that you would have to consider, given the fact that he still has another 3 years on that deal. So, you're locking yourself in to that core going forward. But as you said, in terms of what they gave back, Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., both of those guys that have had a lot of potential. Otto Porter is one of those where, again, back issues, health issues, and just in general has never really been able to truly kind of be that elite 3-and-D guy that he projected to be when he was on the Washington Wizards. And it's never really kind of worked out. And Wendell Carter Jr., there's just one of those things about undersized centers that in certain situations you just get exposed. And unfortunately for a guy like him, he just was finding less and less playing time because much like I almost equated to like a Montrezl Harrell situation where he had that Denver Nuggets series where you're fine in a lot of matchups, but in the matchups that don't work for you. And now we're starting to find that there's more and more of those matchups. You find yourself in a difficult situation. So he was getting benched. They were playing a lot of small ball. So just this kind of scenario helps solidify Chicago's roster and helps solidify their rotation while, Wendell is still a solid player. And for the Orlando Magic, that is 100% moving towards the youth movement now. They're hoping that they can get all this health and everything together for them and get themselves back into some sort of legitimate contention after rebuilding.
Yeah, honestly, Orlando's in a good spot nonetheless. They tried over the years. We talked about this. And their core youth has so much potential in the next, maybe 5-6 years if they're able to keep everybody.
Yeah.
And Van Gundy's a great coach as well, right? And he's great for the youth in itself. So we're not gonna see a competitive Orlando Magic team, in the near future, but you can say it'll be an exciting team to watch nonetheless, right? So keep an eye out for them. Don't count them out as being one of those ridiculously bad teams, bottom feeder type of situation. No, just keep an eye on them. But speaking of Orlando blowing up, there's another big trade that happened, and I'm gonna talk prior to the even bigger trade, right? So let's start off with the Evan Fournier to the Boston Celtics for, I believe, a few second round picks.
Second round picks. Yeah, 2 second round picks is what was the price for an Evan Fournier, who is obviously having a awesome season as far as his offense is concerned. I mean, he's been one of the most consistent shooting guards in the league for the last couple of years now. If you talk about a guy who's just consistently able to come in and out, get you buckets, does it at high efficiency, and pretty much averaging 20 points a game this year, it was one of those moves where, again, it's about fitting in with what the Orlando Magic are looking for as far as the future side is concerned. And for a 27-year-old Evan Fournier, who is going to be demanding quite a lot on his next contract extension, it didn't fit in with the window that the Orlando Magic are now looking at. So with that in mind, we always talk about Danny Ainge not necessarily using his assets, not necessarily using the picks that were in front of him to go ahead and get a almost win now player. That's what he's done to try and get a little bit of offensive firepower onto a Celtics team that's really struggling.
Yeah. One thing about Fournier, I think both of us have had a lot of high praise for that guy. Fantastic player, and he can definitely make a change with any team that he's on. But, I'm confused at that move in comparison to other moves that, Boston should be making. I feel as though, they're missing a lot of depth in that front court, right? And that seems to be the problem with a lot of teams. And there's some sources saying that there's a lot of teams interested, or a few teams interested in Hassan Whiteside right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if Boston be one of those teams that are looking to get Hassan Whiteside. But this Evan Fournier trade makes absolutely no sense to me, because I understand you're having offensive issues, but you have Kemba, you have Jason, and you have Jalen. Those three guys are going to be heavily involved in scoring.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, is this just going to be another Gordon Hayward situation where, you throw in a guy and you're like, okay, you're not going to get the ball as much as the rest of these guys, but here's what we need you to do is come off the bench, or, come in and start and score, have your 5-10 shots and get us like a quick little bit. I don't know. And honestly, with the injury trouble that he has had over the few seasons, like, I don't know. I don't know where this is coming from and how this really benefits Boston in the greater scheme of things.
Fair. I mean, it's a very fair comment to be able to make. And again, what advantage I would say Boston has in this is that if they want him as just a piece that moves, remember, you have him as an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. So it's not like they're necessarily married to him. I think it's one of those where, you need that little extra boost to get yourselves going. Kemba has not had a good season. Kemba has been obviously dealing with injuries early on, and then still hasn't really gotten himself back to the level that he can play at. Marcus Smart obviously was gone for a long period as well. So it's just one of those situations where, go for this stretch run where Boston obviously is not satisfied with the current position that they have. I mean, they're a bottom half of the playoff team. In fact, at times on the outside looking in, which is obviously not the level that you expect from a team that was a Eastern Conference finalist last year. So whatever it takes to help them get back into some sort of contention, some sort of understanding, is something that I believe is a move worth making. And if it's just second round picks that are going out there, even though picks are obviously valuable, picks are something that is not given away lightly, I feel like it's a legitimate move for them to make to actually get an opportunity to try and make a push this year for a deep Eastern Conference run.
Yeah, I mean, but like, I think about it from a perspective of like you'll make the playoffs, but really I feel like I still don't understand, like, you'd probably be just as successful with this team right now than you are with Evan Fournier on your team. That's my argument. But because the weaknesses are still going to be there.
Fair.
But, ultimately, I still feel as though, Boston as a collective team will eventually, figure it out, whatever struggles they have. They still have elite players to kind of mask that. And again, Danny Ainge, they gave nothing for Evan Fournier. I would have expected his value to be a lot more. But hey, Orlando's in rebuild mode.
Yep.
They felt like they had the opportunity. And I don't know if you guys saw, but anyone who's watching Twitter, Evan Fournier tweeted something ridiculous where he's like, "Hey, Celtics fans, if you don't know me, Google my last name. You're welcome." And, I was confused. I'm like, why would he do that? That's like super confident. I go and I check myself on Google what Fournier, I'm like expecting to see the player. But no, there's this really bad disease, and I'm not going to get into it, but it's named after Fournier. And I don't know if that's because he's salty about this trade or if that was just his way to kind of ice break and be like funny. I'm not laughing. I'm like, that's disturbing. And I think he's upset. So, and then Terrence Ross also like just tweeting all day. It's been hilarious.
Fair. No, it's been a fun day. And look, that's the one thing about the NBA that's always interesting, where you will always get movement at the trade deadline, and these movements can actually change the odds for a certain team. And funny enough, before we go ahead and comment on Salman's thing about Rondo, a trade that happened at 12:30 p.m. actually moved the Denver Nuggets like 500 points better in terms of their odds to win the NBA title, as far as
that much?
Plus 2,500 to plus 2,000. So basically, you have gone from Gary Harris, RJ Hampton, a first-round pick was enough for them to get Aaron Gordon back onto the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, one of the most, I would say, obvious and kind of expected trades to happen, but the destination is definitely something that wasn't necessarily first of mind. So Denver making some big moves there.
Oh, yeah. Dude, Aaron Gordon, imagine, like, you look at that starting lineup now and you're like, okay, where is the weakness? Is there any, like, every single one of those guys can cook, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the crazy part. And with a system like, Denver, I'm just really curious to see how Aaron Gordon fits in. Sometimes, we always say this thing, there might be too many cooks in the kitchen, and this could not end up working out well for them. But if, Aaron Gordon is given if there is one strength outside of his offense game, I actually think this is much better than his offensive game, is his defense. And that's something that, Denver can really benefit from. So like you got Porter Jr., who does not do it well. Jamal Murray and Jokic, and these guys are not the greatest defenders, right? So having a guy like Aaron Gordon come in on the wing, I feel like, defensively, like you can put him you can assign him to some of the better players on the opposing teams, giving Jamal a little bit more rest or like a little bit more slack on the defensive end, and same with Jokic. So, versatile guy.
Yeah. And look, the Denver Nuggets roster has just become so incredibly deep. It already was. That was obviously one of the biggest benefits that the Denver Nuggets have had for a number of years now, just how incredibly deep their roster goes, that their second unit is pretty much a minimal drop-off off their first. And now if you're able to now, let's say, shift Will Barton back to the bench where he has been at his most lethal, that instant offense, now you've pretty much like just read out this bench. You've got Monte Morris, you've got Will Barton, as I said. You may potentially be moving Millsap as well to the bench there, JaMychal Green, JaVale McGee, and then you still have PJ Dozier, Campazzo, Bol. Like these are guys that are going to add a lot to that entire depth of the team, especially when it comes down to playoff time yet again. Obviously, the Nuggets made, in many ways, a surprising run to the conference finals last year, but with the way this roster is now, it may be less surprising to go ahead and see them again, especially with Jokic having the kind of season that he is. So very much a interesting and big move for the Denver Nuggets. So let's go ahead and move on to the biggest move that has happened so far, at least specifically from a Toronto Raptors perspective. Obviously, still another 36 minutes in the trade deadline, but Norman Powell. Are we gonna move this up to your jersey? Is the jersey right behind there? Is it there?
Look, yes, I have my two guys right here.
There it is, the guy.
These are the OGs of the Toronto Raptors. Okay, the OGs. DeRozan went, Powell went next, and now it's time for K-Lo.
Oh, don't say that to me. Don't say that. We're not talking about that yet.
Listen, I couldn't sleep last night because I'm like, if this happens, I have to like. I'm not lying. I have to emotionally prepare myself to see K-Lo leave. But the memes that have been coming out in terms of like K-Lo, it always is objectifying his thick booty, and for that, I will continue to admire and objectify myself because everybody needs to know a championship was carried, a team, a legacy, a dynasty was carried with those two cheeks right there.
Oh my goodness. Well, before we go ahead and get to Kyle, though, talk to me about this move because Norman Powell has gone to the Portland Trailblazers in what was pretty much an out of left field move because the Trailblazers were not necessarily one that were coming out as front runners, but the Toronto Raptors were able to get not only Rodney Hood back, but Gary Trent Jr., who has been one of the best shooters in the league this year, alongside the fact that he has been starting any of those games where CJ was injured, and he averaged 18 points a game on 40% from three. So to me, like I said, in a salary matching situation, I would have potentially liked a pick to be coming back our way as well because Norman Powell's value is at an all-time high. Mm-hmm. But to me, that's not a very bad haul, especially given the fact that you're going to be getting a Gary Trent at an incredibly value contract at $2 million a year. But Rodney Hood is also just a UFA next year. So apart from helping your bench this year, it's just a great money-saving move. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So first of all, let me talk about Rodney Hood. I don't think a lot of people know who he is. I know he had a pretty bad injury a few years ago, but, he is someone that can absolutely score on demand and would be a great asset to the bench. You may not hear his name as much anymore, but left-handed shooter, has good mid-range game, can shoot the three, and can slash as well. So, I mean, I think that's an upgrade for us. And if it's like just like a 1 year rental, I mean, it could work out for us, whereas, the Gary Trent situation is, I don't know much about Gary Trent, unfortunately. So for me, seeing a name like that, I wasn't sure if I was happy with the trade. So, you look at Norm, and I think I talked about this in a few podcasts.
Yeah.
This is the final iteration of what a Norman Powell will look like in his career. This is the peak. This is his prime, right? And it's exceptional. This is something that I've been preaching since the beginning of his career in the NBA. I said this guy is going to win us a championship. I also said that this guy is going to be elite. And, it took some time because the evolution that he had to go through as a player was astounding. And now he's an effective 3-and-D guy, and he can slash. He'll get to the free throw line if needed. And the defense, it speaks for itself. And, understand the grind is his motto.
Yep.
And so to that I say, Portland's very, very lucky. And at first I felt like we were undersold. Like I thought this was I'm like, why did we need to do this? But, you think about it from a future perspective. And, you and I, we were both talking about how some of these trades, if we're trading Norman, if we're trading Kyle, it has to be in a way where it sets us up for like some sort of a run in 2 to 3 years, right? And Gary Trent being young still, as you mentioned, he's 20 years old and he's a great 3-point shooter, especially considering like Norm's been shooting just as lights out as well. If you add this guy to the starting lineup, I feel like he's just like pretty much filling in that spot. And, over the years, he could develop his defense or whatever else and get accustomed to the, the system. Because quite honestly, Masai's not making this trade if he doesn't think we can afford Norm in the offseason.
Fair. And look, Talha is also bringing up a great point with regards to Rodney Hood's health, which has absolutely been a big sticking point because this was a guy who was one of the more dynamic scorers when it came to the Utah Jazz when he was there off their bench unit and really bolstered them, was in the running for Sixth Man of the Year for a number of those years. But in the last 3 years, he's only played 27, 21, and now 38 games respectively. So definitely a thing that you have to keep in mind that is there. Hopefully, given how much we know about the Raptors staff in terms of revitalizing people that are otherwise looking like they're at their end, it's definitely one of those moves that are, I wouldn't say high risk just because of the fact that Rodney Hood is an unrestricted free agent, but I feel like he adds quite a bit. I do personally like Derrick Jones quite a bit. Not Melo. I would not want Melo, but Derrick Jones was definitely one of those pieces that could have potentially been included into that. But again, it's about salary matching. I believe Derrick Jones is on a $7 million deal, so he would potentially not have been able to mix without another player gone ahead and done. So
why would you not want a Melo? Come on.
I know. Anyways, we won't spend our time on that because this is not a rumor trade. It's about trades that are actually happening. And with that in mind, it looks like we have just had an announcement that the Rajon Rondo trade, which Salman was talking about slightly earlier, has in fact gone through. So
no way.
The Hawks and Clippers are making a move for that. Doesn't look like we've gotten the finalized details with regards to what's being moved, but Rondo going to the LA Clippers, back to LA again, not on the Lakers this time, but where he pretty much boosted them over the hump, is now going to be doing that playmaking for the Clippers, an area they still needed that help. So that's a nice pickup for them.
Listen, man, I mean, so that pretty much confirms that LA is out of the.
It's for Lou Williams.
For Lowry. Like, there's no way they're taking Lowry at this point, but I'm confused. They brought in Rondo for a reason for Atlanta, but now I guess he can go back to back with the Clippers. Who knows? And, they were desperately looking for playmaking. And, hey.
Wow. No, I'm actually surprised that they gave up Lou for that. That's, wow.
Lou Will?
Yeah, Lou Will.
To Atlanta?
Yeah, Lou Will has gone to Atlanta.
Yo, Lou Will is the happiest man in the world right now, man. They got enough strip clubs over there. Okay?
Wow.
He's excited, let me tell you.
That is, I mean, look, we already talked about Atlanta having a scenario where they've got so many cooks that are going about it. So Lou Will just adds to another potent offense that's there, especially off the bench. I think they may potentially look now to go ahead and move, I'd say, Bogdanovic into the starting lineup and maybe bring a DeAndre Hunter instead off the bench to help bolster that, that defensive situation that you may have. But for Atlanta, that's a big get for a team that was looking to go ahead and make that playoff push, go ahead and make that opportunity to actually get Trae Young some playoff experience. And, well, if there's a walking bucket, there's few more than Lou Williams. So massive for them.
And honestly, it almost occurred to me because I almost felt like at some point Lou Will would be an Atlanta Hawk. I don't know why. It was just kind of in my head. And the reason why is because that jersey, and this sounds like really, like this is going to sound like a really stupid thing, but that jersey on Lou Will is going to look so nice, especially the throwback ones.
Woo! You also have to remember Lou Will was pretty much made in Atlanta. His first years were in Atlanta. His 6th Man of the Year initial runs happened in Atlanta before he finally won it in Toronto. So where he gets
Atlanta
to
or was it Philly?
No, Atlanta, man. Atlanta, where he was having massive guns off the bench. He averaged 15 points a year, 1 year on them. And then, went ahead and made that move over to Toronto after. So I said it's great. It's great for Atlanta. I'm actually quite happy that they made that. But let's talk about the LA Clippers side of it, because as Talha is mentioning here, he could potentially be seeing Rondo as the starting point guard for the Clippers. Yeah. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you talk, Talha just mentioned Jackson and Beverly. They both have proven, like, defensively, those guys are decent, right? Bev, he's been known for that, but you're never looking at him from an offensive standpoint, right? Now, everybody's complaining about how there's a lack of, facilitation within the Clippers organization right now, or the team. Yeah. So, they were scouting for Lowry, and now you see that they picked up Rondo, which is actually a great fit because, he distributes the ball better than most. So, and he has IQ, and that might help, a team like the Clippers. Do I think he's going to be someone who's heavy on ball? I don't think so. I still think that you facilitate around like a guy like Paul George, not even Kawhi. I think Paul George should be more of the on-ball sort of guy, and you go from there. But he adds the ability to interchange who has possession, mainly the possession and the facilitating responsibilities, because otherwise the offense gets really, really stagnant and it becomes more ISO heavy and it becomes really, really dumb. So, you can see that this may add that ball movement element that, they may have been missing. So,
yeah. Absolutely. I don't disagree with any of those points on there. Like you said, for years, since this entire, well, not years, since the Kawhi move happened, I talked about the fact that that lack of pure playmaking that is there on the Clippers is lacking. They didn't have that pure on-ball point guard, that guy who would be able to get Kawhi and Paul George open, and they were potentially being forced to be point guards themselves. And as good as Kawhi and Paul George can be as far as distributors are, that's not their primary role. And for them to now get that opportunity to go back into it, hoping that Rondo can stay healthy in this time and kind of facilitate that, I think it's a great move for them. So congrats on that. And let's see what's going on after. Looks like we've got a couple of comments coming in from Sefu, who is not one who's very happy with that Norman Powell trade. Felt that we could have gotten a better package. And you know what? Maybe not. But you have to remember with the fact that given Norm is going to be opting out of his player option next year, you're pretty much locking yourself into a massive contract that year after. So not every team is going to be necessarily ready or with the cap space available to be able to take advantage of that. But Portland is one of those teams that can do it. So I'm actually perfectly happy with the trade. Maybe we could have gotten a pick or two back. I think that would have been nice given the value of Norm Powell this year, but I'm good with it.
Seth, how dare they not give us Damian Lillard for Norman Powell? That seems like an equal trade to me, right? Like it's going to be tough. One of the things about the Toronto Raptors organization is we've all pretty much grown up with these guys. We've seen the ages where we finally had a team of underdogs that made the playoffs. And then that loyalty that they showed the team, that in itself is something that is irreplaceable. So guys except for Seth's, situation, guys like JV, guys like DeMar DeRozan, guys like Kyle Lowry, Norman Powell, these guys are all going to have a huge impact on our lives and the way that they shaped the way we view basketball in the Toronto Raptors. And unfortunately, the way the business is that, you got to keep going and you got to figure out ways to stay relevant or decide when a good window is for you to be relevant. And that means to give up sometimes some of the most incredible players we've ever had. And it hurts. It sucks. But, at the end of the day, they are our team. And, if anything, that just gives you more of a reason to go watch Portland basketball, right? I'm going to do it. So
I agree. Look, it's all about getting some excitement out there. I'm happy that Norm is going to a situation where he is going to be an incredibly important player in that lineup. Definitely steps right into probably the starting 2, maybe the starting 3, depending on how they want to go about and do that with that Dame, CJ, Norm backcourt, that's pretty damn dynamic, man.
It is crazy.
Portland is going to be definitely one of those teams that's going to be one to watch once the playoffs come around. And shout out to Faraz, who's constantly watching us there, saying hello. So thanks very much for doing that. And we know, Sefu, you're not attached to Norman Powell, so you were just trying to extract as much value as possible. I think that we got it. That was not a possible one. Miles Turner was one of those where I had spoken about it too. Brogdon, no, the salaries wouldn't work. But again, it all depends on what teams are willing to do. Are they willing to take on that contract and then pay him for a longer one in the next period? I'm guessing for the Indiana Pacers in their example, because they've got Karis LeVert already pretty much locked in as their guy for the future. They've got enough backcourt shooting. Otherwise, they probably didn't want to spend that kind of money on a Norman Powell for the way their team is made up and would rather kind of go forward with a Miles Turner. But before we get to keep going, and there are still 21 minutes left on the trade deadline, did want to kind of backtrack a little bit and talk about some of the complementary pieces that have gone ahead and gotten moved, which could still have an impact over a longer period, especially when we're talking about a team like OKC, because one of the trades that happened for them earlier today, which, by the way, now gets them a grand total of 34 picks over the next 7 years, 17 of them being first rounders, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But in order to get that, they traded George Hill over to the Philly 76ers, and they in return received Tony Bradley, 2 second-round picks, and Austin Rivers also went over to the Thunder. So it was a 3-team deal, and Austin Rivers, who was on the Knicks, is going to be replaced by Terrence Ferguson. So a bit of a side piece over there, but it has bigger implications because when we're talking about the Philadelphia 76ers, they were the prime location where it was rumored that Kyle Lowry was going to be ending up. But it looks like, just based on the reports that we've gotten, that Philadelphia is officially out of the Kyle Lowry sweepstakes. Just what is Daryl Morey doing? Always explain this to me. I don't get it.
And first of all, before we even get into that, I wanted to just say, I was 100% emotionally preparing myself for Kyle Lowry to leave to Philly because that's his hometown. And then I went on this Sixers live stream of the trade deadline, and I saw the comments that these fans were making of Kyle Lowry. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? God willing, this trade does not go through because these fools don't know what's good for them. Okay. This is going to be a disastrous franchise for the rest of their lives. Okay. So trust the process. You need the guy who invented the blueprint of process, baby. You need Kyle Lowry in order to win a championship. And you screwed up, quite frankly. I'm just being a little bit of a hater. But you know what? It just comes down to pieces, right? You talk about, trades. If you're a contending team, you don't want to give up, some of the biggest pieces for, someone who may be able to get you over that hump. If it was like a Kawhi Leonard, you can understand. But Kyle Lowry, even though I feel like he's an elite point guard in his own right, he doesn't really bring as much as a scoring superstar. Not that they need one, but what I will say, are you really gonna if you're thinking about Kyle Lowry, we really, really love Kyle Lowry. So, when we think about who we would trade for, Kyle in Philly, you'd be like, okay, well, what about a Ben Simmons, right? It's not going to happen. There's no shot, right?
No. That was never going to actually be
I know that wasn't, but I'm talking a lot of the fans that don't really tune into the deals and how everything works, salary matching and this and that. They were like, okay, well, maybe we get a Ben Simmons out of that. This is a lot of the headlines that you've been seeing, which is kind of crazy. But they were talking about, I think, Tebow,
Matisse Thybulle, Tyrese Maxey, and what looks like 2 first-round picks is what they wanted.
Yeah, and the Sixers didn't want to do that.
Yeah,
and sure. I mean, I personally feel like Philly's still in a pretty good spot.
No, they absolutely are. My problem is it's much as same as my problem is with Danny Ainge. It's one of those situations where taking all the emotion out of it. If you're looking at it purely from a team standpoint, your best guy is a 27-year-old guy playing at an absolute MVP level this year, but he has had his entire career just marred with injury after injury after injury. Your window is not nearly as large as you may otherwise like to believe with that Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid combo. So to me, if you have that opportunity of cashing in these chips to be able to make that run, you take advantage of that in this time, because as much as Philly is still obviously a great team, a team that's going to be in the top of the East, I don't think many people have them beating the Brooklyn Nets as potentially, currently constructed. And that is likely the setup with them being the 1-2 seed. And I don't see too much movement there. That could potentially be an Eastern Conference final matchup. So in those kind of matchups, you need that guy when the offense slows down, when it goes into the half court, where Philly have struggled. Philly have struggled mightily in the playoffs when the offense slows down, when it goes into the half court. Having that kind of floor general, having that kind of just hype man, and also the fact of playing for your hometown, playing for all of that comes together to a move that just absolutely Daryl Morey should have done in this case to go ahead and do it. And for him not to, I feel like it's going to be something he regrets. But for me, as a Toronto Raptor fan, as one who I actually think should potentially be keeping Kyle, I'm okay with it. You don't want to do it? That's fine.
That's okay. Yeah, you know what? We talked about it. We're only going to do a deal for Kyle if it's absolutely going to put us in a better spot, or at least like we can build for the future for a run within the next few years, right?
Sure.
And so, you know, you think about the way that Kyle distributes the ball and kind of gets everybody involved, and you know, I see him fitting very well into this Philadelphia Sixers team. And if anything, it helps Embiid a lot in the pick and roll situation, which could be absolutely disastrous for, Brooklyn to defend. Really, it'll be so difficult.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to cut you off while you're doing this, just because, like I said, alert kind of things. Not that he's going ahead and getting traded as of yet, but we have just gotten the report that the Heat have officially kind of taken Tyler Herro off the table, as in we are not going to include him. That's it, in a trade package. So that may potentially be, I would say, the final nail in the coffin for a Kyle Lowry trade over to the Miami Heat.
So where does he go? That means that he's probably going to be a Toronto Raptor by the end of this.
Or are the Lakers still the last team that's fully engaged in on Kyle Lowry? That's really what it comes down to now.
You know what the crazy
14 minutes on the deadline.
Oh my God. You know what the crazy thing about all that is? Like, I feel like the Lakers have played such a patient game there, being like, nah, we're not going to give this. We're not going to. And they're just waiting for the last minute to make sure that the other teams are out so they can lowball for Lowry. If, Masai may not, if he's really trying to ship him out, they might try to like sneak a quick deal on him. Not to say that Masai can't handle himself.
Yep. But, and here's your next trade update, just up by Josh Ludenberg, that trade offers for Kyle Lowry have been underwhelming as per the Raptors, and they are now comfortable keeping him past the trade deadline. So don't be absolutely thrown off if Kyle Lowry is not traded. But for Mr. P, who's gone ahead and joined us, of course, anything on Powell. Norman Powell has been traded over to the Portland Trailblazers in a package that brought us back Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood. So a salary saving situation, one in which Norman Powell gets a situation where he's going to be a key piece on a deep playoff run team. But yeah, we're still sitting at 13 minutes here on the trade deadline, and it looks like all that lowballing, thankfully, trusting in Masai, not biting on any of that. If he's going to move the greatest Raptor of all time, it's going to be in a situation that actually works for both sides. So we're seeing more and more of that. But if he doesn't move, I would not be.
I don't think anybody's mad if he doesn't move, And, some people might be pissed off about like just the anxiety we went through in the last 24 hours trying to figure out what the hell's going to happen, where he's going to go, and if he's okay. Like, Drake calling yesterday was like, oh my God, that's the nail in the coffin. He's gone.
That piece signed. I
was like,
right here. Like, no.
Like, it went straight to the heart. But, much like the WWE, the trade deadline is much the same. Okay, so a lot of really crazy things happen, and you never know. There's still like 10 minutes, 12 minutes before the deadline officially happens. But I'm kind of disappointed in the other teams for lowballing for a guy like Kyle Lowry. That is disrespect to the highest of degree. I would actually like now try to bust Miami's butt, Philly's butt, and everything. Whether or not we make the playoffs this year, those games are must wins. You slap their face.
Fair. I mean, look, in the end, it's always going to be one of those where if you don't get the pieces that are there, I don't believe that Kyle has straight up said, I want to leave or any of that. It's one of those like, hey, if a potential deal can come up that fits and that works, these are the destinations I want to go to. And of course, the Toronto Raptors want to try and facilitate that. But going back now then to the Toronto Raptors roster, we obviously knew that the front court is something that still needs an upgrade, and that's still a spot that is potentially open. And I haven't seen any moves yet from the Sacramento Kings outside of that DeLon Wright thing. We know that a player like Rajon Holmes was on the trade block. Hassan Whiteside was on the trade block. These are pieces that still potentially need to be moved. Victor Oladipo was still on the trade block. So we could very well be seeing, those last minute transactions that have been almost infamous as far as the trade deadline is concerned. But as it stands, we are 10 minutes away from the official trade deadline. So at this moment, still waiting with bated breath for whatever new moves do end up happening. But we are currently still staying with that. One trade we didn't get to mention, which is, again, one of those side pieces out there where Miami sent both Mo Harkless and Chris Silva over to the Sacramento Kings. Again, talking about those little side pieces. And they got Nemanja Bjelica on the way back, which to me, again, solid move. Bjelica has shown himself to be a great two-way player for the Sacramento Kings, was a very solid vet presence for them, and he's just going to be more of that for the new team that he's on now. So it's going to be an interesting move. Sacramento still on the clock. We're still 10 minutes away. How you feeling?
Wait, who did they trade Bjelica to?
They traded Bjelica to the Miami Heat.
To the Miami Heat. Oh, okay. So actually, when that originally happened, I was thinking that this was, almost a done deal for Kyle to become a Miami Heat, because I felt like they would probably take, like, Bjelica would be kind of like the replacement for a Kelly Olynyk, and Olynyk would be coming to Toronto as per a package deal for Kyle Lowry, right?
Yeah.
But I guess it adds to their depth at this point. He's a great 3-point shooter. And, I don't know, like, odd deal, but hey, if both teams feel like this kind of works out in their favors, then hey, another one of those side deals. You're right.
Fair. And you know what? Not necessarily from a trade perspective, but we talked about Norman Powell going over to the Portland Trailblazers, and now they get even more good news because Jusuf Nurkic has just said that he's going to be playing on Friday. So he's back. He's back on Friday. So that's going to be huge.
What happened? It was his foot, right?
It was his wrist, broken wrist for the last 6 weeks he had been out. So for him to get his opportunity to come back, that's going to be huge for the Portland Trailblazers to get all of their guys together. And like I said, just think about it. You're running now with a starting lineup of Dame, CJ, Norm, Covington, Nurkic. That is nasty. That is a nasty starting lineup, man.
My God. I'm just thinking about how this postseason is going to transpire, right? You already know the Lakers are a great team in itself as long as they have LeBron and AD. Clippers, despite not having the greatest facilitation, they're still a fantastic team and could easily make the finals. But now you have Denver upgrading so drastically that I feel like they can oust any of those teams. And they're a lot younger too, right? Then you look at, Utah. You talked about how, they played fantastic basketball. But I'm most excited for it. And now Portland upgrading that much more too. It's kind of like freakish at this point. But I'm laughing at the fact that we get to see Devin Booker in the playoffs this season. You know what I mean? So just from an excitement standpoint, like, the West is going to be crazy.
Yeah.
The East, not so much. But it's still like, okay, who is going to try to be that one to down Brooklyn? That's my thing on that. But the West, I swear to God,
anyone could come out.
We are in for a freaking golden era of playoffs.
Oh, alert. A new pick and a new trade has happened. Toronto is trading Terrence Davis to Sacramento for a second-round pick. So Terrence Davis, redacted, has gone ahead and moved. I think in many ways people were expecting this to happen just in the aftermath of everything that happened in the offseason, in the aftermath of, the case and everything, and the fact that Terrence Davis himself had just not been playing all that well this entire season, just been incredibly off, inconsistent. So it's just one of those where, hey, it's gone ahead and it's done. And Terrence Davis is now moving over to the Sacramento Kings, where he could, in fact, get some legitimate playing time.
Yeah, absolutely. But we talked about this, right? Like, there were two people coming out of the last season that we said, they have a lot of potential. One was Terrence Davis and one was Matt Thomas. But the same complaint came back from, the coaching staff and just what we saw, which was both of these guys on the defensive end are losing more than they are actually putting up on the board. Fair. And so, giving up a guy like that honestly makes like, if we're getting second round picks, we've got 2 second round picks now, and we know how our scouting team works. We're in good hands. We're in good hands here, and so like maybe we find another fantastic player, a diamond in the rough, and they come onto the squad as a result of these second round picks, or we can use those second round picks for further pieces. Who knows?
Fair. No, absolutely. So it's just one of those where we just, in the end, it all comes down to how are we bolstering our bench. But if you really think about it, what the Raptors have done with these moves, in which we saw Matt Thomas gone, we saw Terrence Davis gone, that's 2 roster spots that have opened up, man. So that's the real kind of overarching entire thing with this, because either that means that we are seeing, a trade go down in which something's going to happen to go ahead and take those spots, or we're going to be seeing a situation in which we maybe take more complementary pieces to go ahead and get it done. So, 4 minutes still,
more 905 players.
Minutes still until the trade deadline's gone. But remember, as we've seen in previous years, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything that needs to be done is going to be done right at 3. You could have situations where trades are in the works, where they're actually kind of in the midst of being sent to the league, and just the details of it are being worked out. So you could potentially go ahead and have that happen. So
yeah, and buyout or sign in 10, whatever the situation is to fill the roster spots. Lots can happen. We've seen it happen over the years.
Absolutely. But again, with that in mind, it just goes back to, if assuming that Kyle Lowry stays here now, we now are likely going to be moving up. I'm guessing Gary Trent is going to be starting, or he could be coming. I don't know how they're going to be doing it.
I think he's going to have. Yeah, he's going to have to start. Or if he doesn't start, you're going to see. No, he's going to probably facilitate the bench, even though I feel like he'd probably be better suited as a starter.
Cool.
Well, but who's going to play? How's it going to work? Think about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that could potentially be doing. He could be a solid bench guy for us to help be that gunner right off the bench. But speaking of bolstering the bench, a trade has happened again with the New Orleans Pelicans. Alert. Oh. New Orleans Pelicans are sending JJ Redick over to the Dallas Mavericks. And we don't know the pieces of what's going on, but that's a solid pick.
Huge pickup. I know JJ has had he's struggling this season with the New Orleans Pelicans. But he's a vet, crazy playoff experience, elite 3-point shooter, and can really, really guide these guys in the right direction. I think that's a fantastic pickup for the Dallas Mavericks.
Absolutely. And I mean, in a situation where now we are seeing the confirmation that Lonzo Ball is not being traded, so he's going to stay on the New Orleans Pelicans, that definitely makes it so, I mean, you're taking away almost like a shooting piece for them this year. So it'll be interesting to see what they go ahead and do on the way back, because that's one offensive piece that's big for them. But perhaps they've now started to see, Josh Hart has been coming off the bench consistently for the New Orleans Pelicans, been one of the best rebounding guards in the league, if not the best. He's almost averaging 8 rebounds a game as a shooting guard, which is absolutely crazy. Baby. Yeah, I love that, man. But he could be now seeing a much bigger role in a team that needs his defense and needs his outside shooting more than ever. So very, very interesting for JJ Redick. And as far as the Dallas Mavericks are concerned, I mean, for a team that has been by and large underwhelming this year, despite the fact that they got, I would say, a big upgrade in the offseason, they were able to get Josh Richardson onto the roster, who has actually been playing quite well for them. Obviously, Luka Doncic had a situation where he wasn't playing well early in the year. His conditioning was off. His game was just not going as well. And Porzingis, who's been inconsistent, perhaps the addition of a veteran presence and a playoff legend in terms of how often he showed up, only had a streak broken last year. So that is a lot for the Mavericks to get.
Yeah, man. He had us when we had that series against Philly, and JJ was lighting us up, just torching us. Every time he had the ball, I'm like, oh, dude, it's going in automatic. But yeah, man, actually it's surprising because Porzingis was one of the bigger names that I heard was going to be dealt out of Dallas. But hey, I guess they couldn't
Yeah.
find anything for him. And, JJ is just a great addition.
Fair enough. And, we were just talking about that front court side of it, but we just found out that Andre Drummond is officially being bought out by the Cleveland Cavaliers. So that's happening. That means that's a minimum contract or a small contract going somewhere, obviously to a contender. But hey, we've seen him be associated with the Lakers. At one point, he was associated with the Nets. He's associated with the Clippers. That's a lot of options to get for a guy who was one of the leading rebounders in the league. Andre Drummond is officially being bought out. And at this time, we have hit 3 p.m. on the trade deadline. So any and all kind of last minute moves that are happening, we're going to start to go ahead and see. But man, that's a lot of stuff that you expected to happen didn't, other than like the Aaron Gordon move, which everyone saw coming, and the Norman Powell one, which is going to be somewhere. I mean, there was a lot of big pieces that we assumed would go somewhere, but they haven't.
No, and well, we're still going to find out. Right? We're still going to find out. We just got to wait a little bit. There's a little bit of a lag time always. We know this.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, the biggest name on the market was Kyle Lowry. And, nothing as of yet has shown any indication that he's going anywhere. So with that being said, K-Lo ain't going to win no more, baby. I cannot express the relief that I have for that. You mentioned
we don't know that yet, man. Don't get, like I said, you can't get.
I know.
You can't get relieved until like 5 p.m. But
okay. We'll just
for the sake of the show,
knock
and
on
for
wood.
the sake of us talking about those things after, as it stands right now, no deal has been made, official at least, as far as Kyle Lowry is concerned. As far as Victor Oladipo is concerned, we found out that Lonzo is not going to be moving. So those were in many ways, the three big pieces that were left in terms of which hand is going to drop first. But let's go ahead. Perhaps we can exhale.
Let's do breathing exercises.
Okay, let's talk about the Toronto Raptors roster now, because we have now, as you said, lost Matt Thomas, lost Terrence Davis, lost Norman Powell, got these two pieces back. Now, how do you see the rotation going, and what exactly should we be doing otherwise?
Right now, I feel like we found some great, some great minutes in guys like Bembry. We've seen some great minutes in guys like Paul Watson and, Yuta Watanabe. And so you also have Stanley Johnson. So, like, in terms of minutes, really all you're doing is substituting a guy like Gary. Oh, hold
on. Alert. The Raptors have reached an agreement to send Kyle Lowry and Yuta Watanabe to the Lakers for Kyle Kuzma.
No.
No.
You're lying.
I'm not lying.
For Kuzma?
Yeah.
For Kuzma.
For Kuzma.
For Kuzma is what I'm saying.
Yep. No, wait, hold on.
Official?
Hold on. Let me go ahead and verify all this.
If this is official, I am gonna
Hold on.
Masai, you've lost all credibility, my friend.
Hold on.
For Kuzma? Like I said, these sneaky Lakers.
Hold up. Wait. I think it's not. No. It was a one of those Woj accounts, but it's the ones that look similar to it, but it's actually not.
Scare the crap out of me. I was gonna say that's the worst trade in the since the Vince Carter trade, man. Kuzma? I'm gonna lose my mind. I don't want Kuzma.
Fake Woj. Not. This is why I hate.
You can't do that.
I scared the crap out of myself. Yeah, don't worry.
Dude, I was gonna just goodness gracious, Harris, don't do that. That's you gotta be careful. Like, I know sometimes I like to troll our WhatsApp group that we have with our friends, and I put in like this really ridiculous headline just to kind of see how because we're all really passionate basketball fans, just to see how they would react and they react really, really aggressively. So then this was kind of payback. This was kind of payback for that. Yo, Harris, you're not looking so good, buddy.
I was crying. I was like, no, this can't be a thing. And then I was just like, okay, it's not a thing.
Yo, I feel you. The fight or flight.
Woo. This is where
just recover. This is the moment.
Go ahead and come in.
No. Dude, I don't even know what to say anymore.
I may need something for cholesterol lowering. What's on the vegan diet to get me lower on the BP right now?
Jesus Christ, man. Just chill out.
Okay. But let's actually get back to what was an actual legitimate source. Hoop Central. Looks like that we're going to see Mo Wagner moved over to the Boston Celtics for Daniel Theis. So that looks like it's going to be a legit move. Yeah. Hoop Central reported it. Bulls are looking to trade Mo Wagner over to the Boston Celtics for Daniel Theis. And you know what? Wagner has been one of those guys that haven't gone ahead and gotten that same kind of playing time that he otherwise should have. But there you go. Side move on there. Daniel Theis, who had obviously been huge for the Boston Celtics in the last playoff run, is undersized. It eventually goes ahead and comes back to him. But no.
So they really like Tristan Thompson for their future? Come on, guys.
No idea.
Okay. Thank you, Danny Ainge, for being the GM. I am so proud of you this little trade deadline. Make your team worse.
Fair. And in the aftermath of the LaMelo Ball injury, we now hear that the Hornets have gone ahead and acquired Brad Wanamaker from the Golden State Warriors. So they're one of those side pieces that go ahead and push it through.
Yep, that's a good pickup. I like that pickup. As much as I don't like Wanamaker because of what he did to Toronto last season, but he is a great player. That's something you can't underestimate.
But yeah, man, that's just wild. Danny Ainge is definitely one of those GMs. First of all, I disagree that he is the best, because no best GM would go ahead and tell Isaiah Thomas to go play for his life out there, tell him you're going to re-sign him and then trade him away for nothing.
Dude, that was hard.
That right then and there was
especially the same season that he lost his sister. Like, are you kidding me?
But what I will say is the same situation that we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the 76ers, Daryl Morey, Danny Ainge. At some point, even though as a GM, you're always looking for the future, you're always looking towards maximizing future gains. At some point, you have to cash those chips in. At some point, you have to go ahead and understand that these are my guys, and I need to go ahead and make an actual run with them. And where Philly was a potential runner for Kyle Lowry, decided not to do it, where Boston was even as far back as a front runner to get Kawhi Leonard and didn't go ahead and do that. It's just one of those things where, conservatism as well as a mixture of focusing on the future rather than thinking about what's necessarily best for the present. There's got to be a balance. And I don't think Danny Ainge and by extension now Daryl Morey are doing that.
Well, here's what I feel about that. Right now, Brooklyn seems to be the front runner in any capacity, right? So I feel like Danny Ainge may be thinking like, hey, my team, as much as I love them, is not a team that's going to actually make a run, even if we add another piece to it, right? So maybe that's their sort of thought process. Maybe we'll wait till free agency and then see what we can do from there. Because right now, they don't have a shot.
It's true. And look, in general, I was talking about this earlier as well, in that the trade deadline is not the best spot, first of all, to be making franchise-altering moves. You're always looking to go ahead and make the side pieces.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about guys that are going to Miami, and this is actually legit, it's Waj ESPN. Houston is trading Victor Oladipo to the Miami Heat. It happened. There's your shoe that dropped. Official.
Okay.
Victor Oladipo is moving to the Miami Heat. And for the offbeat life over here, where we were having that argument last year about Oladipo and Jimmy Butler, and I had to back off, now they're just together. So is that going to be enough to go ahead and make that push for the Miami Heat going all the way yet again into the finals?
Hey, Oladipo is, we've seen him be a an all-star and play at like levels that, you know, we absolutely did not ever expect him to get to. And he got injured and then got injured again, but that doesn't mean that talent is still not talent. And a guy like to be complemented with a bunch of hardworking individuals like himself, can't wait to see what happens there in Miami. You know, Miami's really trying to make a run, eh? Like this seems like they're trying to be the anti-Brooklyn right now.
Yeah, look, they want to obviously prove that last year was no fluke. It was 100% team effort all the way through, and they just showed with their just tenacious defense how far that can go. And we talked about Eric Spoelstra being one of the best coaches in the NBA. I still absolutely believe that. I believe that Pat Riley is absolutely one of the best GMs in the league.
Time.
So it's just time. Exactly. It's an incredible organization. I may not like them for other reasons, but as an organization, they are absolutely incredible, and they are 100% a legitimate Eastern Conference contender when fully healthy. So it's all about now what they're going to be doing. And I said, with Victor Oladipo going there, and I mean, I see Offbeat Life talking about it as well. What does that mean for Tyler Hero's role? That is an interesting question, because obviously he was their main shooting guard. He was in many ways playing the combo of he'd be starting, and then they'd stagger him off early to play essentially as the main ball guy with the second unit. Now, think about it. You have Dragic on that team. You have Jimmy Butler obviously on that team. You have Victor Oladipo now on that team. And there's still, you know, Duncan Robinson, all these other shooters that are there. Where does Tyler Hero actually fit? And does that mean that they are now more willing to make that move?
You know, that's a great point. I'm trying to figure out for myself, like, what happens now with Tyler, because this may be what we were thinking about, you know, where that little last minute move and then Kyle becomes a part of, you know, that conversation. What?
This is the Woj ESPN. Woj ESPN Twitter. The Raps are officially keeping Kyle Lowry.
Okay.
Now, there we go. Okay, can I now get to exhale, please?
I think so. See, when Woj says something, it's like, you know, your priest or your imam being like, hey, or your best friend or your teacher just telling you like, hey, man, it'll all be okay. And you're just like, okay. You could breathe.
Woo!
Great, man. This is great. Great news for the Toronto Raptors.
Oh, man.
You know, like we said, it really came down to, can we get the pieces that we need to put us in a better spot? Harris, no one wants to see you twerk, okay? But I mean, in this situation,
if Lowry's booty is staying in Toronto, this booty from the swing is going to stay in Toronto doing its thing as well.
No, I said, you know, no one wants to see that. But just for now, because I realize how happy we are, you definitely need to twerk. That should be your challenge. The one that you did miss a few weeks ago is to twerk.
Oh, was
live.
that the challenge? Was that the challenge? No one gave me any of these challenges. I see we have a couple of guys on here right now. Let's go ahead and get this down. Obviously, Oasis beat me in the All-Star break, as sad as it was. But none of you guys gave me a challenge for me to do, especially one that we hadn't done before. So, Offbeat Life, Seth, any of the guys that are watching right now, give me a challenge to go ahead and go deal with this situation, because I'll do anything right now. Kyle Lowry's staying. I'm happy. We got those pieces that go ahead and actually, bolster the bench unit, which is one of the big things we were waiting for. We're still waiting for a front court boost, but I think that may be happening potentially in the offseason, or we may be potentially seeing that in the buyout market. There's still guys to be bought out.
Do you see the Raptors buying out like Rajon Holmes?
I mean, first he has to be bought out by Sacramento, right? And I still think it's one of those scenarios where it's just how it is. And I'm going to go ahead and disagree with Offbeat Life over here, speaking about, not keeping Kyle as far as our direction is concerned, because I've spent a lot of time talking about this side of it. If you were talking about your current core at this moment, which is that Fred, OG, Siakam, all of those guys in that 26-27 period, and the fact that now we're not going to be having to pay Norm that $20 million salary that he was likely going to be commanding next year, we can now actually be in a situation where we could sign Kyle for a period where it's like 2 years, 3 years for a number that makes a lot of sense given the contract situation. And you get the benefit of his leadership, his veteran capability, and just everyone going ahead and being those guys to kind of become the next big thing under him, because they still are relatively young as far as their careers are concerned. And obviously with Kyle having a game that ages like wine, I actually don't see it as a bad thing for the Toronto Raptors to go ahead and keep him. To me, it actually not only boosts their morale, because I'm sure everyone was down as hell after that last game, but now
they're like, oh, I got to deal with this crap again.
I see us going on a run for the rest of this year. Oh, and by the way, we did get the other pieces of that trade as far as the Heat and the Rockets are concerned. So the Heat have gotten Victor Oladipo, while the Rockets, on the other hand, get Avery Bradley and Kelly Olynyk. So
interesting.
Yeah, so interesting pieces. So obviously the Heat didn't want to give up on any of their core pieces out there. Avery Bradley, who has been injury prone and not really, I'd say, relevant at this point. It's more just thrown out there. But Kelly Olynyk is a solid piece, and I think he'll be a complementary piece to what they have in Christian Wood to give them that ability to not only be dominant inside, but also have that stretch four. So not a bad trade as far as the Rockets were concerned, when they were obviously not going to be paying Victor Oladipo in that next contract.
Yep. And it's in many cases, this has been more of an underwhelming trade deadline for us, especially considering how much hype was around the whole Kyle Lowry situation. But again, we're going to wait till 5 o'clock before we hear anything. But if, Kyle Lowry is to stay and it's confirmed by Woj, then, as Raptors fans, we were kind of excited about some of the deals that may have been, just to see Kyle be a contender, but also to get back some pieces that might help us with the team that we currently have. It was exciting, but, at the end of the day, Kyle Lowry's Kyle Lowry, and whichever way it works for him and the organization, we're going to be happy with it, whether he's on or he's not. So, Kalo, I'm going to spank that little butt, not little, and I can't wait to see you back. And if anything, I can't wait to see what the ovation's going to be like when, maybe things are back in Toronto.
Absolutely. And hey, as always, Mr. P, thanks very much for joining. I know you get busy with all your work, and we always miss you coming on live. So anytime you get an opportunity, definitely do that. But with that, we are going to go ahead and bring an end to this trade deadline edition of the Swing Podcast. Obviously, lots of ups and downs, lots of moves, lots of non-moves that we will have lots to discuss about as we keep going. As always, we are live Tuesdays and Fridays, so we will have a show tomorrow night at 8 p.m. where we get to go into a little bit more detail. But with this, we get to leave you off, and I get to leave you off with another transaction that Marquise Chris is going to the Spurs. It's all right. It don't matter. But you know what does matter? You guys engaging with us.
No, I'm scared for him, because if he's on the Spurs, at one point they're going to play LA and the Clippers, and Ibaka's going to get him again.
Fair enough. Well, with that, this is your boy HK. That was that guy Oasis. I'm sure you can go ahead and go kiss the Kyle Lowry jersey that's on one of those sides over there.
I don't do that. I'll wear it. I won't kiss it.
Until the next show, tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we will see you then. And thanks very much for joining. Peace.
Simmons, is this the Tiger? Oh, boom shakalaka! Game! Series!